As the sleek black sedan pulls into the parking lot, the sharp sound of tires screeching against the concrete echoes through the empty space. Inside, James, the CEO of a rapidly growing bank, checks himself in the rearview mirror. His dark eyes burn with a quiet intensity. His tailored suit fits him perfectly, his hair meticulously combed. He's about to make a move that will rock the corporate world. It's not just another business day. The air is thick with anticipation as he steps out, his posture exuding confidence and authority. But today, James isn't just any CEO. He's a black man, about to face the most grueling challenge of his career. The world around him is built on a system that doesn't want him to succeed, especially not as the head of a major bank. You're not welcome here, the whispers always say, but James is used to the battle. He knows how to fight and win. But what happens when the battle turns personal? As he walks toward the entrance, a sharp glance from a colleague lingers in the air. "James, you've got a moment," the voice calls out, but it's laced with an undertone of disbelief, as if his mere presence in the building is an anomaly. His colleague, a middle-aged white man, stands there with his arms crossed, eyes scanning the corridor as if looking for an escape route. James knows that look. He's been on the receiving end of it too many times. "Just a moment," James replies coolly, his voice even and measured, betraying none of the frustration that churns beneath the surface. Inside the office, James can feel the weight of every eye on him. It's a subtle thing, but he's learned to read the room like a second skin. The faint whispers, the awkward silences, the way people avoid eye contact, it's all too familiar. He walks past the rows of cubicles, every step purposeful, each footfall resounding like a drumbeat in the silence of the room. The walls seem to close in on him, a reminder that no matter how high he climbs, he will always be seen as an outsider. But today, James isn't here to play the role of the outsider. He's here to take control. To make a statement. As he reaches his office, he spots the envelope on his desk. The envelope that will change everything. Inside, a detailed report on a recent investigation into his bank reveals something James didn't expect: fraud. Serious fraud. The kind that could bring the entire operation to its knees. His heart races as he scans the document. But as he reads, something catches his eye. The investigation was led by someone within his own company, someone who used their position to siphon funds into a personal account. And the most chilling detail? The suspect has been under suspicion for months. The bank's board knew about the fraud and did nothing. It's clear now. This isn't just a financial scandal. This is a setup. They've been waiting for him to slip up. They've been waiting for the black CEO to fail. The anger rises within him, hot and uncontainable. James stands up, his chair scraping against the floor. He moves with a predatory grace, the anger in his chest now fueling his every step. He knows what he has to do. This isn't just about saving his reputation. It's about sending a message that no one, no matter their color, can be taken down so easily. He's been underestimated for far too long. As James strides to the front of the office, he takes a deep breath. The board members are already seated, their faces stoic, as if they already know what's coming. But James isn't here to play by their rules. He's here to make a statement. "I'm firing everyone," he declares, his voice cold and final. "Effective immediately. Everyone in this branch. Now." The room falls silent. The tension is palpable. A few gasps echo through the room, but none of the board members move. They were expecting a fight, but not this. James watches them squirm in their seats, his mind calculating every move. He's no longer just the black CEO, they've underestimated him for the last time. The final blow comes when he turns to leave, leaving behind a room full of stunned faces and a board that can no longer deny the power of the man they thought they could control. James is no longer just a CEO. He's a force. A force they can no longer ignore. Vanessa sat at the desk, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of her tablet. The words from Lisa, Natalie, and Edward echoed in her mind, each one a sharpened blade, aimed at her dignity, her authority, and her identity. She knew exactly what they were trying to do. They had underestimated her, dismissed her, and tried to erase her presence in the very institution she had built. But now, in the quiet stillness of the bank's private lounge, she wasn't just sitting, she was calculating. Her fingers brushed over the screen of her phone, and within seconds, Carla's voice crackled through the speaker, calm and steady. "We've got everything logged. Internal audit is receiving the timestamps. Phase 2 of Protocol 6 is active. We are ready when you are." Vanessa's lips curled into a cold smile as she set her phone down and looked up. The tension in the room was almost unbearable now. She could feel it crawling under her skin, creeping through the walls, the air, the very marble floor beneath her feet. The power had shifted, but it wasn't over. She was just getting started. "Lisa," she said, her voice quiet but carrying through the room with the weight of a sledgehammer, "you called me a fraud in the company I own." "A fraud? In my own building?" The words landed like a final blow. The room froze, as if time itself had stopped to listen. Lisa stiffened, her face paling, her confident smirk faltering. Edward glanced at his phone nervously, his fingers twitching, unsure of what to do. The crowd of clients, previously passive observers, now seemed to lean in, waiting, as though the world outside had ceased to exist. "You have no idea what you just did," Vanessa continued, her voice growing colder, harder, more resolute. "But you will." The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning as the weight of her words sank in. It was a moment of reckoning, a turning point. The bank, the branch, the system, they had failed her, and now it was time for her to act. She rose from her chair, each step deliberate, as if she were walking into a courtroom, not a lounge. "Carla, activate Phase 3. Lock down their access." A beat of silence passed before Carla's voice echoed again, now with the unmistakable edge of authority. "Done. It's all locked down. They've lost everything." Vanessa's gaze never wavered from Lisa, Natalie, and Edward. She stood before them, her stature now commanding, her presence undeniable. "You think you can treat people this way? You think you can humiliate me like this?" "In front of my own clients?" she asked, her voice calm, but laced with power. Lisa opened her mouth, but no words came out. Edward shifted uneasily, his arrogance crumbling. Natalie looked down, unable to meet Vanessa's eyes. The room had shifted from disbelief to realization, and now, from realization to sheer shock. "You have no idea what you've just done," Vanessa repeated, her eyes now locking on each of them in turn. "This is the last time you will ever treat anyone like this again." With a single, sharp motion, Vanessa reached for the button on her phone that would send the final message to the board. "I don't need to raise my voice," she said, her tone now steady, final. "I raise the standard." The words were not just a statement, they were a declaration. A declaration that would reverberate through every corner of the bank, through the hearts and minds of every person in the room. Vanessa turned, her eyes briefly meeting those of the clients now standing in quiet support, their murmurs of approval spreading like a ripple across the room. It was a quiet revolution, but it was a revolution nonetheless. "This branch, this system, it ends today," she said as she stepped away from the desk. The final blow had been struck. The employees who had sought to break her had only broken themselves. And in the wake of their collapse, Vanessa Clark stood taller, stronger, and more powerful than ever. She had not raised her voice. She had raised the standard. Vanessa turned away from the table, her footsteps deliberate, echoing in the now still lounge. She had made her statement, and there was no going back. Lisa, Natalie, and Edward stood there, broken by their own arrogance, unsure of how to move forward. The room felt suffocating, the weight of their mistake pressing down on them, and it was clear that they had underestimated the woman standing in front of them. Vanessa paused for a moment at the door, her back turned, and then, with a small but significant smile, she spoke again, her voice steady but filled with undeniable power. "You think this is over? It's only just begun." She didn't wait for a response. Her words hung in the air like an unshakable truth, one that would reverberate long after she left. She reached for her phone once more, her fingers tapping across the screen to send a final command. "All systems locked down," Carla's voice rang out from the other end of the line. "The internal audit is in progress. We've logged everything." Vanessa gave a brief nod, her face cold and composed. Good. Keep it tight. This will be handled internally. She didn't need to say more. She had already won. The bank was hers, every part of it, from the top down to the people who thought they could get away with treating her like a fraud. With a final glance at the stunned staff, she turned and walked out of the lounge. As she passed through the front doors, she felt the eyes of the clients upon her, but this time, their gazes were not filled with doubt or judgment, they were filled with respect. She had done it. She had taken control of a situation that had been designed to break her, and in doing so, she had broken the system that had allowed it to happen. Outside, the cool Miami air hit her face, and for a brief moment, Vanessa closed her eyes, savoring the feeling of her victory. It wasn't just a personal victory. It was a victory for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly, dismissed, or made to feel like they didn't belong. She had not only taken back control of her own company, she had dismantled the very structure that perpetuated inequality. She had raised the standard, and now, the whole world would see it. As she walked to her car, her assistant Carla's voice came through the phone again. We're ready for the press release, Vanessa. We've already had a few inquiries. Vanessa's lips curled into a smile, but it was a smile that held no warmth, no joy. This wasn't about fame. This was about something much bigger. Hold off for now, she said, her voice calm but fierce. I'm not done yet. Let them stew for a while. Let them feel the weight of what they've done. The car's engine roared to life as she slid into the driver's seat, the city of Miami sprawling out before her. Vanessa Clark was no longer just the CEO of Summit Enterprises, she was a symbol. A symbol of power, of resilience, and of the relentless pursuit of justice. And today, she had shown the world exactly what that looked like. The drive was smooth, the streets of Miami blurring past as Vanessa navigated her way through the city. Her mind was focused, calculating the next steps in her plan. The actions she had taken today were just the beginning. The bank would be the first domino to fall, but the system, the network of power, had been cracked wide open. Vanessa wasn't just going to take down a few individuals, she was going to expose the entire structure of systemic bias, and today, she had taken the first swing. Her phone buzzed in her hand, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was Carla. The board has approved your request for an immediate audit of all personnel records. They're pulling every employee file connected to Lisa, Natalie, and Edward, Carla said, her voice crisp and professional, but with an undercurrent of excitement that Vanessa could hear. Good. Keep it tight. No leaks, Vanessa replied, her voice cold and authoritative. She was already 2 steps ahead, and every move needed to be calculated. And make sure all their correspondence is logged. Everything. There was a brief pause before Carla responded, understood. We're on it. Vanessa disconnected the call and turned the car down a quieter street, heading toward the small office that would now serve as her temporary headquarters. The building, though modest, held significance. It wasn't just an office, it was a base for her revolution. The revolution to tear down the old systems of discrimination, to build something better, something just. She had built her empire, not just in business, but in her values, in the standards she held herself to. And now, the fight for real justice was beginning. As she parked the car, Vanessa took a moment to compose herself. She had been calm, controlled, but deep inside, there was a fire burning. It wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't even about proving people wrong. It was about making sure that what happened today never happened again. She stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance, her heels clicking against the pavement, each step carrying the weight of what she was about to do. She was about to send a message, loud and clear. As she entered the office, the team she had assembled was already at work. Carla, her most trusted assistant, was at her desk, eyes glued to the screen, tracking the flow of information. We've got eyes on everything, Vanessa, Carla said without looking up. Good, Vanessa replied. We're not just shutting this down. We're going to expose it. We're going to make sure the world knows what happened here. And what's the next move? Carla asked, finally looking up, her expression serious. Vanessa paused for a moment, letting the weight of the question settle. We go public. We let the media know that this was not just about a few bad employees, this is about a system that is broken. And we show them that it's time for change. Time for real change. The room fell silent as the gravity of her words set in. Vanessa wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every person who had been silenced, every person who had been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed because of their race, gender, or background. Today, she had not just defended her honor, she had ignited a spark. A spark that was going to light the world on fire. Vanessa's eyes hardened with resolve as she turned to Carla. Prepare the statement for the press. We're going to hit them hard. Carla nodded, her fingers already moving across the keyboard. It's happening, Vanessa. You've already won. Vanessa smiled, but it wasn't a smile of satisfaction. It was the smile of someone who had only just begun. No, Carla. We've only just started. The revolution had begun, and nothing would stop her now. The minutes felt like hours as Vanessa sat in the small office, her eyes fixed on the screen before her. The statement to the press was ready, the email drafts drafted, and the team was finalizing every last detail. Outside, the sun had begun to set, but Vanessa's mind was still sharp, her focus unwavering. Carla stood by, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, waiting for the final go-ahead. It's ready, Vanessa, Carla said, breaking the silence. Are you sure about this? It's going to send shockwaves through the whole industry. Vanessa turned her gaze to Carla, her expression calm but filled with a quiet intensity. I'm not just doing this for me, she replied, her voice steady, almost detached. This is for everyone who's been overlooked, pushed aside, treated like they didn't belong. The world needs to see this. She paused, the weight of her words settling in. It's time to show them the truth. Carla nodded and hit send, the press release going live to media outlets, social media platforms, and industry blogs. The floodgates opened almost immediately. Vanessa watched as her phone lit up with notifications, journalists, influencers, and executives all chiming in with their thoughts. She was ready for this. She had prepared for it. But as the messages flooded in, something inside her felt different. This wasn't just about reclaiming power or seeking revenge anymore, this was the start of something bigger. As the night wore on, the room buzzed with activity. Carla monitored the social media streams while Vanessa fielded calls from colleagues, allies, and media representatives. One call in particular caught her attention. A journalist from a major financial network wanted an exclusive interview. This is it, Vanessa said, a hint of a smile crossing her face. Time to make my statement loud and clear. She stood, straightening her blazer, her posture exuding confidence and power. Set it up, Carla, she said. We're going live. The next hour was a blur of cameras, lights, and questions. Vanessa sat at the center of it all, cool and composed, answering each question with precision. She knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a personal battle, it was a battle for a seat at the table, for recognition, and for accountability. Vanessa, why do you think the system allowed this to happen? Why now? The journalist asked, leaning forward. Vanessa's gaze locked on the camera, her voice calm and clear. Because for too long, people like me have been forced to fight for the seat they've already earned, she said, her words carrying the weight of years of experience. Today, I decided to stop fighting for a seat. I took the table. And the world is going to see the truth, whether they want to or not. The interview was over, but the impact was only beginning. Vanessa knew the firestorm was coming. There would be resistance, backlash, and doubt, but she was ready. She had built her empire on resilience, and now, she was using that same strength to burn down the systems that kept people like her in the shadows. The press release was out, the interview was live, and Vanessa Clark had just declared war on inequality in the corporate world. As she sat back in her chair, her phone buzzing incessantly with notifications, she allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. But it wasn't over, not by a long shot. The revolution had just begun. The phone calls came in one after the other, a relentless flood of inquiries, messages, and demands. Vanessa didn't flinch. She had been preparing for this moment her entire career. The press release had spread like wildfire, and now, it seemed like the entire corporate world was watching her every move. From every corner of the business landscape, questions poured in, questions about her decision to take down her own team, about her motivations, about her next steps. But none of them mattered. She wasn't playing the game anymore. She had rewritten the rules. Vanessa sat back in her chair, the office dimly lit by the glow of her laptop screen. She watched the unfolding chaos with a cold, unwavering gaze, her fingers steepling in front of her as she processed the storm. Carla was at her side, handling the influx of media requests, her calm efficiency a sharp contrast to the frenzy outside. But even Carla's composed demeanor couldn't mask the shift happening within the company. People were starting to talk. Some were in support, their voices growing louder by the minute. Others were skeptical, questioning the intensity of Vanessa's response. "We've got more calls from the board members," Carla said, her voice clipped but professional. "They're asking for a meeting first thing tomorrow. They want to know if you're ready to take this to the next level." Vanessa's eyes never left the screen. The image of Lisa, Natalie, and Edward from earlier today flashed in her mind, their faces frozen in disbelief. But she was no longer interested in their disbelief. She was focused on the bigger picture. "I'm ready," Vanessa replied, her voice low but firm. "This is just the beginning." Carla nodded, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she finalized the details for tomorrow's meeting. Vanessa took a deep breath, finally allowing herself to relax for a moment. The pressure was immense, but she had always thrived under pressure. She had never been afraid of a challenge, in fact, she welcomed it. The truth was, Vanessa had been preparing for this day for years. The system that had kept her down, that had marginalized her, was now exposed for what it truly was, a fragile house of cards that could be toppled in an instant. And topple it, she would. But she knew this fight wasn't just about exposing the wrongdoings of a few individuals. It was about dismantling an entire system, about proving that leadership, true leadership, wasn't about titles or positions, it was about power, integrity, and the willingness to make hard choices, no matter the cost. "I'm going to take control of this," she thought to herself. "I'm going to rebuild this company. A company that stands for something. A company that leads by example, that doesn't let anyone slip through the cracks." The phone rang again. It was a video call this time, and the name on the screen made Vanessa pause. It was James. He was one of the board members, the one she trusted the most. She clicked the answer button. His face appeared on the screen, his expression grave but approving. "Vanessa," James began, his voice steady but filled with something else, something unspoken, "you've done more in the last 24 hours than most CEOs do in a lifetime. But I need to ask, are you sure about this? Are you sure you're ready to take the next step?" Vanessa met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she said, her voice carrying the full weight of her resolve. "This is just the beginning. I'm not backing down now." James nodded slowly, a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Then we're with you. We'll back you all the way." The conversation ended, but Vanessa's resolve had only grown stronger. She had the support she needed, but more importantly, she had her own unwavering belief in what was right. Tomorrow's meeting would be a turning point. Tomorrow, she would show them all that she wasn't just the CEO of Summit Enterprises. She was the leader of a movement. A movement that would change the corporate world forever. The next morning arrived with an air of quiet anticipation. Vanessa stood before the mirror, adjusting her blazer, her reflection calm, poised, and ready for what was to come. Today was the day she would step into the lion's den. The board members would be expecting answers, but Vanessa knew this meeting wouldn't be about explaining herself, it would be about making them listen. She had made her point publicly, but this was where the real work would begin. Her office was silent as Carla handed her the folder with the prepared agenda for the meeting. "They're all waiting, Vanessa," Carla said, her tone as calm as ever, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, pride, maybe, or admiration. "It's time." Vanessa nodded, her expression unreadable. She was ready. She had been ready for this moment for years. She had spent so long playing by the rules, following the systems put in place by people who were never going to let her succeed. But now, with every step she took, she was rewriting the rules. She wasn't going to wait for permission anymore, she was going to take what was rightfully hers. As the elevator doors closed, Vanessa's mind sharpened. The boardroom was just a few floors away, and she could already feel the weight of their eyes upon her, the questions they would throw at her, the doubts they would voice. But this time, it would be different. This time, she was the one in control. The doors opened, and she stepped into the boardroom, a wave of murmurs filling the space. Every member of the board was there, their faces a mix of curiosity and skepticism. But Vanessa didn't flinch. She walked to the head of the table, her steps measured, her back straight. "Good morning," she said, her voice cool, but carrying authority. "I hope you've all had the chance to review the documents I sent over. It's time we had an honest conversation." She paused, looking around the room, her gaze settling on James, who gave her a slight nod of approval. The others looked tense, but Vanessa could see the fear in their eyes, fear of the change she was about to bring. "I won't waste your time," she continued, her eyes locking with each of them. "This isn't about the scandal that's been blown up in the media. This isn't about who's to blame or what went wrong. This is about the future of this company, and what we're going to do to make sure this never happens again." The room was quiet, the weight of her words hanging in the air. She had their attention now, and she knew it. For too long, we've allowed the corporate world to operate on a system of inequality, of bias, and of unchecked power. It's time for that to end. I am not here to play along with those systems. I am here to dismantle them. The words landed like a bomb in the room, but Vanessa wasn't finished. She wasn't just making a statement, she was making a plan. "I've already taken the first step," she continued. "I've fired the employees who have shown themselves to be part of the problem. Lisa, Natalie, and Edward gone. They will not return." She could see the shock in the room, the disbelief. They had expected her to apologize, to back down. But instead, she was taking control. "And this company will not thrive until we make systemic change. We will implement an independent diversity and inclusion audit immediately. We will raise the standard for everyone, from top to bottom. And we will hold ourselves accountable. If we're serious about leading, then we need to lead by example." The board members shifted in their seats, some whispering among themselves, others looking like they were about to speak up. But Vanessa didn't let them interrupt. "I'm not asking for your approval," she said, her voice cold and firm. "I'm telling you how it's going to be. And if you want to continue to work with me, then you will support these changes. If not, you're free to walk. But I am not backing down. Not now, not ever." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Vanessa had made her stand. She had drawn the line. There would be no turning back. The next move was up to them. And as Vanessa looked around the room, she knew that she had already won. This was no longer just about a CEO reclaiming power. This was about the beginning of a revolution, one that would change the entire corporate world, one step at a time. The silence in the room was deafening. Vanessa stood at the head of the table, unwavering, her eyes sweeping over the faces of the board members who sat frozen in their seats. The weight of her words hung in the air like a challenge. No one dared to speak. She had made her position clear, and now it was time for them to respond. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker with the realization that Vanessa wasn't just some figurehead CEO, she was a force, and she wasn't afraid to wield that power. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, James cleared his throat. "Vanessa, you've made a strong case," he said, his voice steady, though there was a flicker of something unspoken in his eyes. "But this is a huge shift. It's going to take time, and we need to be prepared for the fallout." Vanessa nodded, her expression not softening, but her voice turning more measured. "I'm not here to make things easy, James. I'm here to make them right. And I'm ready for whatever comes next. But I can't do it alone. This company is built on a foundation of trust, and if we're going to survive, that foundation needs to change. She paused, letting her words settle. The question is, are you willing to change with me? Or are you going to stand in the way? There was a tense moment of silence as the board members exchanged uncertain glances. Vanessa's gaze held steady. She wasn't backing down. This was the moment of truth. And then, one by one, the board members started to nod, some hesitantly, others with more conviction. James spoke again, his tone firm but supportive. "We're with you, Vanessa. We'll back you on this. It won't be easy, but we believe in the direction you're taking." A sense of relief washed over the room, but it was only temporary. There was still a long road ahead. Vanessa didn't smile. She didn't need to. She had just secured a victory, but the real work was just beginning. "Thank you," she said, her voice cold but resolute. "But remember, this isn't just about the next quarter or the next year. This is about creating a legacy. This is about making sure that this company stands for something more than just profit. We're going to build a company that is not only successful but is also just, inclusive, and ethical. And that starts now." The board members nodded again, some with more enthusiasm than others, but none dared to speak out against her now. Vanessa had established herself as the leader in this room. She had drawn the line in the sand, and they would follow her or they would fall behind. As the meeting came to a close, Vanessa gathered her papers, her movements smooth and purposeful. She had won the battle, but she knew the war was far from over. The corporate world was watching, and she would not let up. "Let's get to work," she said, standing up. "The change starts today." As she left the boardroom, Carla was waiting for her outside, her expression one of quiet pride. "You did it," Carla said, her voice filled with admiration. "You've got them on your side." Vanessa met her gaze, her expression still serious. "This is just the beginning," she replied, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Now, we show them what real change looks like." The door to the boardroom closed behind her, but in that moment, Vanessa knew she had already begun to reshape the future of not just her company, but the entire industry. The revolution she had started was far from over, it had only just begun. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Vanessa's decision to take charge had sent shockwaves through Summit Enterprises, and she could feel the eyes of the business world upon her. Every media outlet, every analyst, and every competitor was watching her next move. The board had given their tentative support, but the real test had just begun. Vanessa knew that the first few weeks would be critical. She had to prove that the changes she promised were more than just words, they had to be actions. The first step was an internal overhaul. Vanessa sat down with her leadership team, laying out the plan for the immediate changes that would come. "We're starting with a full audit," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "We need to assess every department, every policy, and every practice. No stone will be left unturned." Her team nodded, understanding the gravity of what was being asked of them. The audit would be difficult, uncomfortable, but necessary. For years, the company had operated with outdated, biased practices that had been swept under the rug. Vanessa was determined to change that, no matter the cost. Next, she turned her attention to the hiring practices. "We need to overhaul our recruitment process," she stated. "We will make sure that our hiring reflects the diversity we aim for, and we will ensure that every employee, from top to bottom, has an equal opportunity to succeed." The changes weren't just limited to policy. Vanessa also wanted to address the company culture. "We need to create an environment where everyone feels valued," she continued. "No more underestimating people because of how they look or where they come from. Everyone has a voice, and everyone will be heard." There was a moment of silence in the room. The team members, who had once been hesitant, now looked determined. They were ready to make the tough calls, to take the risks. They knew that the road ahead would be challenging, but with Vanessa leading them, they were confident they could rebuild the company from the ground up. Vanessa didn't stop there. She reached out to key stakeholders, to influential figures in the industry who could help her make these changes a reality. She knew that if Summit Enterprises was going to lead the way, it would need the backing of the wider corporate community. Weeks passed, and the changes started to take shape. The company's internal systems were being revamped, diversity initiatives were rolled out, and Vanessa's commitment to transparency was clear. But the true test came when the first quarterly report was released. The numbers weren't stellar, but they weren't disastrous either. What mattered more was the shift in the company's culture. Employees felt heard, valued, and empowered. As the board gathered for the next meeting, Vanessa stood at the head of the table, her posture firm and confident. The room was quieter than usual, the tension palpable. But Vanessa wasn't afraid. She had already set her course. "You said it would take time," she began, looking around at the board members. "But change is happening. The company is on the right path. And I'm not going anywhere." The board members exchanged glances. James, the most skeptical of them all, finally spoke. "Vanessa, we've seen the changes you've made. We've seen the shift in the culture. I think we can all agree this is a new era for Summit Enterprises." Vanessa nodded, but she wasn't done. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice carrying weight. "The work we've done so far is just the foundation. We've only scratched the surface, and there's still much more to do." As the meeting adjourned, Vanessa felt a quiet satisfaction. She had taken the first steps in transforming not just her company, but the entire industry. There would be challenges ahead, but she was ready. She wasn't just building a business, she was building a legacy. And nothing, not the industry, not the critics, and certainly not the old system, would stand in her way. Weeks turned into months, and the world watched as Vanessa's vision for Summit Enterprises began to take shape. The changes were slow, but they were undeniable. The company culture had shifted, employees were engaged, ideas were flowing, and diversity initiatives were not just talked about but actively implemented. Vanessa's leadership was no longer a topic of skepticism, it was becoming a beacon of change. But while the internal transformation was underway, external challenges were never far behind. Competitors, some of whom had once dismissed Vanessa as just another CEO trying to rock the boat, were now starting to pay attention. It was one thing to talk about change, but it was another to make it happen, and that was what Vanessa had done. Her success, though, had not come without cost. The media attention that had initially been supportive began to shift. Critics started to question whether the company could maintain its momentum, especially as the stock market's volatility became a bigger talking point. The headlines shifted from praise to doubts. "Is the new Summit Enterprises too focused on woke policies to maintain profits?" one headline read. "The cost of diversity, will Summit's culture drive it to bankruptcy?" another one questioned. Vanessa had anticipated these reactions. She knew that making real change would stir up resistance, but she wasn't about to back down. As Summit Enterprises continued its restructuring, Vanessa had made it clear that her focus wasn't solely on short-term profits, it was about building a sustainable, ethical company. The real test would come when the next quarter's numbers were in. Vanessa sat in her office, reviewing the data with Carla, who had stayed by her side throughout every challenge. "These numbers aren't bad," Carla said, her voice calm but with a hint of concern. "But the media is making it sound like we're on the brink of disaster." Vanessa nodded, her expression hardening as she looked over the reports. She wasn't naive, she understood the importance of the numbers, but she also knew that transformation couldn't always be measured by the immediate financial gains. "They don't see the long-term plan," she replied, her voice steady. "This isn't just about making a quick buck. It's about creating something that lasts. We've put the foundation in place. Now, it's time to build on it." The door to her office opened, and one of her senior managers stepped in with a report. "Vanessa, the board wants to meet next week to discuss the quarterly results," he said, his voice cautious. "They want an update on how the changes are affecting the company's growth." Vanessa looked up, meeting his gaze. "Tell them I'm ready. We'll show them what we've built." As the week progressed, the pressure mounted. The board meeting loomed large, and the financial reports were far from perfect. But Vanessa wasn't going to let anyone dictate her success based on a few figures. She had built this company on values, on trust, and on integrity, and she knew that if they gave her the chance, the results would follow.
The day of the meeting arrived, and Vanessa walked into the boardroom with a sense of calm determination.
She wasn't going to let the critics, or even the board, shake her confidence. The room quieted as she took her seat at the head of the table. "I know the numbers are not where we want them to be," she began, her voice steady. "But let me be clear, we are on the right path.
Our culture is stronger than ever.
Our employees are more engaged, our diversity initiatives are showing results, and we are setting a new standard for what it means to be a leader in this industry.
We will grow on our terms."
The room fell silent, and Vanessa could feel the shift. The board members who had once questioned her every move now listened intently. She had shown them the way forward, and they had no choice but to follow. When the meeting concluded, there was no grand applause, no immediate breakthrough, but there was something more important, a quiet understanding that Vanessa was in control. She had led them through the uncertainty, and now they were all aligned on the path she had set.
As Vanessa left the meeting, she allowed herself a brief smile.
It wasn't about the approval of the board. It was about something far greater. She was leading a revolution, and the world was starting to take notice. The months continued to pass, and Vanessa's leadership at Summit Enterprises became less a topic of speculation and more a proven reality. The company was evolving, growing, and, most importantly, breaking through barriers that had once seemed insurmountable. While the critics had their say, their voices were slowly becoming more distant, replaced by an ever-growing chorus of support from employees, customers, and industry peers alike. But as the company flourished, Vanessa knew that the fight was far from over.
The true measure of her success would not come from quarterly reports or media headlines, it would come from the lasting changes she made to the corporate landscape.
The board, once skeptical and fearful, had begun to see the bigger picture. They were now fully behind her, pushing for more radical change. The meetings had changed from defensive sessions to collaborative discussions about how to continue pushing the company forward. They weren't just asking for results, they were asking for direction, for a roadmap that would secure their place at the forefront of the industry. Vanessa had already proven that she was capable of leading through adversity, but now, her goal was to lead with vision, to redefine what it meant to be a leader in the corporate world. One evening, as she sat at her desk reviewing the latest diversity and inclusion metrics, Carla entered with a message.
"Vanessa, there's someone here to see you," she said.
A reporter from the Business Journal.
"They're looking for a one-on-one." Vanessa's eyes lifted from the screen, her expression unreadable. A reporter? After everything that had happened, the media was still intrigued by her?
"Send them in," Vanessa replied, her voice steady. The door opened, and a young reporter walked in, notebook in hand, a mix of excitement and apprehension on their face. "Miss Clark, thank you for taking the time to meet with me," the reporter said, setting down their bag and sitting across from Vanessa.
"I've been following your story closely.
Summit Enterprises has become an example of how corporate leadership can change. There are a lot of CEOs trying to replicate your model, but many are wondering, how do you maintain this momentum?
What's next?"
Vanessa leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her. This was her moment, not just to defend her decisions, but to solidify her place in history. "The momentum doesn't come from me," she said, her voice calm but full of purpose. "It comes from the people who work here, the ones who believe that change is possible, that things don't have to stay the way they are. I've made it clear that our success won't be measured just by our profits. It will be measured by how we treat people, how we create opportunities for everyone, no matter their background or who they are." The reporter scribbled quickly, clearly impressed. "But the media, the industry, the shareholders, how do you keep them satisfied when they're only looking at the bottom line?" Vanessa's gaze sharpened, a small smile playing at her lips. "They will be satisfied when they see the bigger picture," she said. "When they realize that the real bottom line is not just about financial returns, it's about social impact, about creating a legacy that stands for something greater than just numbers." The reporter nodded, but the question lingered in the air. "You've already accomplished so much. But what's next for you, Vanessa? What's the ultimate goal?" Vanessa's eyes gleamed with quiet confidence as she leaned forward. "The ultimate goal is to leave a legacy," she said. "To build a company that isn't just successful in the traditional sense, but one that challenges the status quo, that sets new standards, and that creates an environment where everyone can thrive.
That's the legacy I'm building.
As the interview ended, the reporter left with a sense of awe, clearly moved by Vanessa's words. But as Vanessa sat back in her chair, her gaze turned inward, focused on the future. The company was on the right path, but Vanessa knew that the work was far from finished. The revolution she had sparked was gaining momentum, and she wasn't going to stop until it had changed everything.
Summit Enterprises wasn't just a company anymore, it was a movement. And Vanessa Clark wasn't just a CEO.
She was a trailblazer, and the world was beginning to take notice.